Installing your fabric to a Grace frame is easier than on any other frame because of our FabriFast system. Each rail has a FabriFast slot and tubing. We recommend that you start with some practice material so you can become familiar with machine frame quilting before doing your first quilt. There is more than one order in which to install your fabric layers. Any order will work as long as the correct layer is placed on the correct rail with the correct side facing up. We'll be using cloth leaders for this segment. Start by making a center mark on each cloth leader on the edge that you'll be pinning to your fabric. Cloth leaders are a good way to manage and align your fabric, and they save you time at the end of your project. The shortest cloth leader goes to the take-up rail, the middle length cloth leader goes to the next closest rail, and the longest cloth leader goes on the third rail. There is no need for a cloth leader on the fourth rail for batting if you have one. Line up the FabriFast line on the cloth leaders with the FabriFast slot in the rails. Install the cloth leaders into each rail by pushing the fabric into the FabriFast slot with the tubing using the FabriFast tool. Install all the cloth leaders this way, making sure the shortest piece goes on the take-up rail, the next shortest on the middle rail, and the longest on the third rail. Make sure that all your cloth leaders face up when pulled into the center of the frame as shown. Now we'll pin the top layer to the cloth leader on the third rail. We first need to mark the center of the fabric so that we can match it up to the center of the cloth leader. We'll use a pin to mark the center. Pin the top layer to the cloth leader on the third rail, starting from the center and working your way toward the ends. When you have finished pinning the fabric, roll it onto the rail. Make sure that it rolls onto the rail straight and evenly. Use your hands to smooth out any wrinkles as you roll. The backing, which will be the bottom of the quilt layers, will first be attached to the cloth leaders on the take-up rail and the second rail. First we'll mark the center of both ends of the backing with a pin. Now begin pinning the backing to the second rail from the center. Make sure to pin the backing so that the finished or printed side of the fabric is facing down. When one side of the backing is pinned to the second rail, roll most of the fabric onto that rail. Again, make sure the fabric is rolled onto the rail evenly and smoothly. With the backing rolled on the second rail, pin the free end of the fabric to the cloth leader on the take-up rail. Again, start pinning in the center and work your way toward the ends. We'll now put our batting on the frame. If your frame has a fourth rail, we'll start by rolling the batting onto it using a FabriFast tube and tool. Make sure not to stretch the batting. If your batting is fairly thick, it might be easier to attach it to the rail with tape rather than using the FabriFast tube. Now pull the edge of the batting between the second and third rails and let it lay flat over the backing layer. To finish installing your fabric, pull the edge of the quilt top up over the frame and lay it over the backing and batting. Put a few pins through all three quilt layers to hold them in place. Now that all the fabric is pinned and rolled to the rails, make sure to adjust both the left and right side of your take-up rail so that it is even. Set it at about a finger's width above the bed of your sewing machine. When you are quilting, you may need to raise the take-up rail again as you roll the fabric onto the rail and the roll becomes bigger. Always keep just enough space between the fabric on the rail and your sewing machine so that you can move the machine freely. Now we'll attach the bungee clamps to the sides of your fabric. These provide added side tension as you quilt. First, attach the clamps to the backing and batting. Then pull the bungee cord through the provided holes and secure them. If you wish, you may now use your sewing machine to baste the top and sides of your quilt. This will help keep your fabric aligned and save you time at the end of your project. If you baste the edge of your quilt now, you can remove the pins that were holding the quilt layers in place. After you have quilted a section, you need to roll up the quilt to the next section. First, remove the bungee clamps, then unlock the ratchets so that the rails can roll backwards, and roll the fabric onto the take-up rail. Lock the rails again, and replace the bungee clamps when you have rolled the quilt to the next section. If you used your machine to baste the quilt on the frame, you can continue to baste down the sides of the quilt every time you roll to a new section. When you get to the end of your quilt, unpin the top fabric layer from the cloth leader and repin it to the batting with a few pins to hold it in place. Next, use your machine to baste the bottom of your quilt. After getting familiar with this process, we know you'll enjoy many projects on your quilting frame. If you ever have any questions, many resources can be found on our website at www.graceframe.com or give us a call at 1-800-264-0644.